Death, taxes, and the Dallas Stars and Winnipeg Jets playing in overtime this season. On today's show, we will talk about last night's crazy matchup between the Stars and Jets that ended with a Dallas Stars victory in overtime. And then to close out the show, we will talk about tonight's big matchup, also a divisional showdown for the Dallas Stars in Music City against the Predators. All of this coming up on a Thursday edition of Locked On Stars.
You're Locked On Stars, your daily podcast on the Dallas Stars. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Howdy, Stars fans. Welcome back to the Locked On Stars podcast, the only daily podcast covering the Dallas Stars, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Dane Lewis, your local expert on all things Dallas Stars, credentialed member of the media, coming to you on this Thursday, February 24th, a chilly, icy, snowy, sleety, whatever it is, wherever you are in the world. A pretty cold day here in Dallas, and I certainly hope wherever you are listening and wherever you are today, I hope you are safe and warm. Just crazy times, a lot of crazy and chaotic things happening in our world right now. So I hope that you, the listener, are safe and well. And I do appreciate you tuning into today's show to hear a reaction from last night's matchup between the Stars and Jets, and then get a little bit of a preview of tonight's matchup between the Stars and the Preds taking place in Nashville. But before we get into all the games, again want to reemphasize, thank you for stopping by today's episode of Locked On Stars, for making us your first listen of the day. Be sure to subscribe to and follow the Locked On Stars podcast if you do not do so already. You can find us wherever you get your podcast at, whether that's on Apple, Spotify, Google, or YouTube. If you like ingesting your podcast in a video format, you can find us there as well. So be sure to hit that like button, subscribe button, follow button, what have you. But without any further hesitation, let's get right down to business, talking about last night's win. And this win, this game in general for the Stars, felt very reminiscent of a game that we might have seen back in the early stages of this season. A game where, the Stars come in and everything seems either evenly matched on paper or they have the advantage on paper. I think that maybe you put the Stars in that category for this game, just based on what happened the last time these two teams met up. And Jake Ottinger playing out of his mind, which we'll talk about him in a second. Still doing just fine, is number 29 for the Dallas Stars. But this was just one of those weird games where the Stars made a lot of mistakes and they had some tough sequences that they kind of put themselves into, especially in the early going in this matchup with the Jets. Lots of turnovers, 18 total giveaways on the game, but so many turnovers in the offensive zone, neutral zone, and even trying to clear the defensive zone. Just a lot of mistakes in that regard. The Stars didn't really seem to be playing with a lot of intensity, which is a word that gets thrown around a lot with this team, often the lack thereof. And that was definitely the case in the early going in this game last night. Certainly didn't seem like the Stars were fully engaged. I mean, they did just come off a road trip that they did well on. I mean, they went 2-1. Clearly not ideal to lose a game on the final game of that road trip to the worst team in the Western Conference. But nonetheless, back in the home building, not a 100% crowd because of the inclement weather and the dangerous road conditions, but still seemed to be a pretty good-sized crowd that was making a lot of noise. I mean, I couldn't tell from TV. Still seemed like a pretty noisy and rowdy, rambunctious Dallas Stars crowd. But the Stars just seemed a little bit slow going. And again, they do that a lot this season, but especially in the earlier stages, they would have these games where they come out really slow, commit a lot of turnovers, and allow the opposition to build a lead, which Winnipeg did. But thanks to the heroics of Jake Ottinger several other times throughout the first frame, he was able to keep it that way, 1-0 going into the first intermission. And then things kind of started to turn around. They started turning around a little bit after the first Winnipeg Jets goal. The Stars were getting plenty of looks at the net, but of course, Connor Hellebuyck, a guy that is a fantastic goalie in this league and historically pretty good against the Stars. They were showing his numbers before the game. I think it was like 9-5-3, I believe. So he's still looking for that 10th win against the Dallas Stars in his career, but he's had a pretty good career so far against the guys in green. But the Stars were peppering him early on after they gave up their first goal, just not being able to chink his armor. But then Denis Gurianov, I think, embodied the night very well for the Dallas Stars, at least offensively. He didn't score the first goal. Jamie Benn was responsible on a shorthanded goal. Nonetheless, teaming up with Roope Hintz off of a sloppy play while Winnipeg was on the power play. which we don't see too many shorthanded goals across the NHL or really even from the Stars, but still good stuff to see there. But then Denis Gurianov, like I said, embodying what this team kind of went through offensively. He used his excellent skating ability and his speed to penetrate that, Winnipeg zone. I almost said Arizona zone. I have the Arizona LA game going right now. The Kings are up 2-1 right now. So keeping an eye on that because there's some standing implications there depending on how the Pacific Division shapes out. But nonetheless, Denis Gurianov setting the stage again, using his excellent skating, penetrating that Winnipeg defensive zone, getting a really good look at the net. But of course, Connor Hellebuyck ready. He blocks it. But then the Stars reload with, that full top offensive line. Jamie Benn, Tyler Seguin, and Denis Gurianov all crashing into that Winnipeg zone at the same time. Jamie feeds Tyler on a really nice kind of behind the back feed, almost kind of behind the play feed. And then Gurianov continues to crush the net. Tyler feeds him, and the rest, as they say, is history. It was a beautiful play. He gets rewarded for crashing the net again, using his skating and speed. I mean, Winnipeg didn't really see him there. And even if they did, who knows if they had anyone on the ice at the time that could have kept up with the skating ability of Denis Gurianov. So for that, he gets my star of the game. Jake Oettinger could easily get it. But Jake Oettinger has gotten it a lot recently, and I imagine he's going to be getting it several more times throughout the rest of this season. Was tweeting a lot about him throughout the game just because he was making some really great saves and keeping Dallas in this game throughout the early going, especially through the first two frames when the offense was pretty lackluster from this Stars team. But both goalies in general played a fantastic game. I mean, Connor Hellebuyck, nothing new there. He was my pick to win the Vezina Trophy this season. Doesn't seem very likely, although my Calder prediction is now finally starting to make a little bit of sense. Cole Caulfield finally starting to heat up for the Montreal Canadiens, but probably a little bit too late for him. But 36 saves, 39 shots on goal faced for Connor Hellebuyck. A good night all around for him. And then Jake Oettinger, only 20 saves on the night. Not as many shots forced by the Winnipeg Jets, but he did give up 2 goals. But still a pretty good night in the office for Jake Oettinger, feeding off that home crowd. We know that he loves to play in front of the hometown fans here because he didn't really get the full experience last season in his first stint with the NHL club. But now he gets full crowds every time he's at home. And I know he feeds off it. And he had a good performance last night and made some really big plays down the stretch. Had to dig deep in OT and at the end of regulation as well. Make some crucial saves to help keep Dallas in the game. He continues to dazzle. He deserved to be the 3rd star of the week for the NHL last week. And he's continuing to put in that work and show why he is considered a future franchise goalie, hopefully for the Dallas Stars for a long time. But this game really came down to which team could make the least amount of mistakes and which team could capitalize on the other team's mistakes. And the Dallas Stars were able to do that. Both teams made several errors in this game. It was a sloppy game. It was another physical game, a lot of bumping and a no call. Jamie Benn clearly gets whacked in the face by a high stick. It was an accidental high stick, but nonetheless, a high stick is a high stick. Of course, the referees don't call it because why would they? It's only their job. So why would they do their job? And there should be a rule. I will throw that in. Whenever something like that happens, that you should be able to go back and be like, yeah, we missed that. We need to make that call. Because we know this happened last time the Stars played the Jets and Miro Heiskanen got whacked and was literally bleeding. But there was still no call. And they told Coach Bowness, yeah, we have to call it in the moment. If we don't call in the moment, it can't get called, which is ridiculous in my mind. So NHL, be better. I know that can be said for a lot of things that the NHL does or does not do. And it probably won't happen because why would the NHL do anything that makes sense logically, especially when it comes to bettering the game and, making sure that players can stay somewhat safer, or at least whenever they do get whacked in the face by a wild stick, that their team can benefit from it. I digress. The Stars able to overcome all that, take advantage of the mistakes Winnipeg made, whether that's turning over the puck well on the power play or just giving them opportunities to score on the odd man rush. And even in overtime, Tyler Seguin making a pretty snappy veteran move to get his own rebound in the air and send that puck over Hellebuyck's head for the game-winning goal in OT. Doesn't get too much more thrilling than that. Today's episode is brought to you by BetOnline.net. Football might be over for this season, but basketball is in full swing for both pro and college hoops. From all the latest odds, totals, player performance props to where the next fired coach is going to land, BetOnline.net is the #1 spot for all your sports betting needs. BetOnline remains the best spot for all your sports scores, podcasts, and news this season. And it's not just basketball. BetOnline.net is your source for hockey, boxing, and UFC odds. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends and action. BetOnline.net, where the game starts. Jumping back into today's episode of Locked On Stars, your first listen of the day. Your host, Dane Lewis, here at Dane_Lewis on Twitter. And our show is also on Twitter at Locked On Stars. You can give us a follow at both of those places. Continuing to talk about last night's game between the Stars and the Winnipeg Jets. And another theme in this game that's been a theme for the Stars over the past several stretches of some of their games has been the power play, or rather the lack of a power play presence on the ice whenever the Stars have the man advantage. The Stars went 0 for 5 on the power play last night, 10 penalty minutes in total for the Jets, including a 4-minute penalty for a high-sticking call that actually did get called at one point in the game, but of course they missed another one. So what are you going to do? NHL officiating is bad, it's flawed, and it misses things, but it also gets things right sometimes. But nonetheless, the Stars not able to capitalize on any of their opportunities. 5 power play opportunities is a great amount of opportunities, and any team would be glad to have those, and a lot of teams would probably take advantage and at least score once on those, but not the Stars in this game. They are 4 of 26 on the power play since the All-Star break, although they are 5-2 as a team. Their win-loss record 5-2 since the All-Star break, which is good. It means they're finding ways to win games, and some of those games have been tight and closely contested. I mean, 2 of these games, overtime wins against the Winnipeg Jets, a win against the Nashville Predators, a win against the Colorado Avalanche. I mean, you name it, and even a shootout win against the Chicago Blackhawks. Those were the 5 wins, and then a shutout loss to the Avalanche, and of course, that embarrassing Sunday loss to the Coyotes. But in that game, a lack of power play opportunities. And even when you do get them, not being able to execute, it's just very daunting and very weird. I mean, a 15.4 power play percentage, 20th in the NHL since the All-Star break, just very out of place for the Stars team. They're 9th overall in the season now, at the time of recording this, at least 23.8% on the season as a whole. As a team on the power play are the Dallas Stars, and they typically find themselves at or near the top 5, but now they've dropped to almost out of the top 10. Still a good place to be, relatively, considering that there are 32 teams in the league, but it's just a little bit concerning to see. And it's one of those things that, the Stars were missing at the beginning of the season. They found it. They kind of, it carried them through that win streak that they had back early in November, December. And even whenever they weren't on the win streak, it was still a consistent part of their game. But now it seems to have fallen off again, which, I guess fitting for, last night's game being similar to an early season game for the Stars team. But it just feels like they are less aggressive. They're not forcing the issue as much. They seem very conservative on the power play, which they need to force the issue more like they've been doing on the penalty kill. Because on the flip side, out of the All-Star break, the Stars penalty kill has been very, very good. They did give up a power play goal against Arizona and last night against the Jets, but it was again it was whenever Jamie Benn got whacked in the face. And so I think the Stars try, bickering with the referees a little bit, but also thinking, hey, maybe the play should be blown dead because our captain is laying on the ground, having just taken a stick to the face. So, and of course, that Arizona power play goal going through the skate of Miro Heiskanen, also a pretty weird sequence as well. But nonetheless, the Stars penalty kill has been very, very good out of the All-Star break, but the power play seems to have lost its life. So it's almost like it's one thing or another with this Dallas Stars team, which is frustrating because if they could figure out both, I mean, this team takes that next step to being a legit playoff contender and probably, winning some of these games that they probably should be and should not be dropping, like the Arizona game. It just feels like that maybe the 5-on-5 game is almost too much for them to handle. They get a little worn out on the 5-on-5 game, and then they're using the power play as like a rest period. I don't think that's actually what they're doing, but that's just what it seems like. Because they're playing conservative. They're taking their time, maybe making one too many passes on a lot of opportunities. And it's just unsettling to see. And I think it is something that the Stars will work through because they did it earlier in the season and they found a way to make the power play effective. And it really benefited them. And I think this is just one of those things that it happens throughout the season. Your special teams have to adjust and, they find a few kinks in them. Maybe other teams start to figure it out a little bit after watching some game film or after watching, playing against the team several times, like Winnipeg has, like Nashville has, like Colorado has, Chicago even, a few matchups with them this season. So if there's a time for the Stars power play to get cold, it is now, and not near the end of the season where points in games are very crucial. Whenever the playoff race, if it's as tight as it is now, I mean, those games at the end of the season are going to matter so much because you absolutely have to win those games. So I'm sure as the spring continues to unfold, the Stars will get back on track with the power play. They really do need to do it. And hopefully with that, we'll see some more scoring from the top line, because the top line still, doing top line things, getting shots on goal, being effective, but not really finding the back of the net and not really getting on the score sheet. Rupe Hintz getting an assist on that Jamie Benn shorthanded goal last night against the Jets. And that's the only guy on the top line that notched any kind of point. Joe Pavelski did draw a stick to the face that did get called. And Jason Robertson, lots of shots on goals, but nothing to show for it on the score sheet. So I think with the power play will come more scoring and more points for the top line, because that's where those guys do a lot of their damage, is on the man advantage. I'm not a rapper though, even though that just rhymed. Bars. But yeah, I am excited to see how the power play comes out on the road trip, because, or I say road trip, they're going to Nashville for one game and then coming back to Dallas for a matchup with Buffalo on Sunday. But against Colorado Avalanche in their building, the power play actually seemed to kick into a little bit of high gear. We saw Joe Pavelski kick things into a high gear. So maybe playing a road game against a highly ranked divisional opponent is the key to success right now for the Stars power play. And what better place to get the power play reignited again than in your most heated rivals building with their fans there? I think that would be really, really cool. And I'm sure that will be a point of emphasis for the Stars team going into this Thursday matchup, which we're going to talk about in just a second after a quick break, after we hear from some of our sponsors. And closing out today's episode of Locked on Stars, going to send you on your way with a quick preview of tonight's matchup between the Dallas Stars and the Nashville Predators, taking place at Bridgestone Arena in Music City, Nashville, Tennessee. The Stars get no rest. They literally, at the time of recording this, are probably boarding the plane, or maybe the plane is already taken off to Nashville post-game, so they can get ready for their game tomorrow and have time at morning skate, get prepared like a normal game day. The Predators, 62 points on the season, are 5-4-1 in their last 10 games. They are reeling a little bit. I remember at the All-Star break talking about power rankings and talking about how the Predators are having a great season, despite many people not really predicting them to be where they were at. I think they were second in the division. They were for sure in a top 3 spot. I think they were second in the division, only behind Colorado in the Central. And, myself and I think others were like, wow, this is an incredible season. UC Saros having a great season between the pipes, Philip Forsberg and Roman Josi, Duchesne and company having a great season offensively, scoring the puck, actually playing pretty good defense at times as well. But, not a complete collapse, but they do seem to be reeling quite a little bit in a weird spot now, out of the top 3 in the division, currently holding that top wildcard spot in the West with Edmonton, 59 points, Anaheim with 59 points, and, of course, the Dallas Stars with 58 right on their tail. It's not that, far of a race right now for even the top wildcard spot. Of course, the Stars will take any playoff positioning they can get, likely the second wildcard spot. But, it's not out of reach that they could get to that first wildcard spot if they're able to win some games, and if some other teams are able to lose some games. That Los Angeles-Arizona game now tied at 2. So, the Coyotes looking to give another playoff contender some trouble like they did the Dallas Stars. So I guess that's a little bit encouraging there. But by the time you're hearing this, that game will have already ended, and only time will tell how that one wraps up. But, this game is going to be a very, very crucial game for both these teams. That said, with the point situation, the Predators' last game was on Tuesday. It was a road win over the Florida Panthers, which is a very impressive road win. Very impressive win in general. Going to look very good on the end of season resume because it's hard to go into Sunrise, Florida and beat the Panthers. The Stars know that firsthand. A little bit easier to beat them at home, but hard to beat them on the road. But the Predators did just that. And this will be the last tune-up, if you will, indoor tune-up for the Nashville Predators, as their next game after this one will be on Saturday against the Tampa Bay Lightning and the Navy Federal Credit Union Stadium Series game, in which the Nashville Predators will be sporting some abysmal jerseys. I don't just say that because they're the rivals of the Dallas Stars. They're just not good-looking jerseys. The Tampa Bay Lightning jerseys for that game, they're okay. They're better than Nashville's, but nothing great either. But they're certainly not as atrocious as the Predators jerseys. Definitely not my cup of tea. But I think that adds an interesting, predicament angle to this game. Maybe the Predators are looking forward to that. Maybe a little bit too much. Maybe they're looking ahead, excited to be playing outside where the Tennessee Titans play football. They've played outside before here in Texas and lost to the Dallas Stars in the Winter Classic. But now they get home ice advantage with their fans crowding the stadium. And maybe they're, I don't imagine this is the case because these are professional athletes who are very good at focusing on the moment most times. But I think that that's something that could, play a role in this game. Maybe the Predators are excited for Saturday's matchup with the Lightning, and maybe they, lose a little bit of focus, and the Stars are able to come in and catch them sleeping, catch them off guard, and maybe come out of this game with 2 points and get a big win on the road. Special teams are going to play a big role for both teams. The Predators, currently at the time of recording this, have the 8th overall power play in the league. The Dallas Stars, like I said earlier, have the 9th. So this is, again, a game where the Stars need to get things rolling on the special teams, because it's not a guarantee that the Nashville Predators are going to be cold on the power play like the Stars have been as of late. So if there was ever a time for, like I said, the power play to get restarted and kind of get a kickstart, it would be this game against the Preds. I imagine we'll see UC Saros between the pipes for the Predators. I imagine he'll probably also play Saturday as well, but a day worth of rest there for Friday. So I imagine we'll see him. Don't know who we're going to see in the net for the Stars. Jake Ottinger played really great on Wednesday night. Will he get the back-to-back playing time like we saw with Braden Holtby on that previous Stars road trip whenever they were playing Eastern Conference opponents? Or will Braden Holtby get the start there? And you play Jake Ottinger, you save him for Sunday's afternoon's matchup with the Buffalo Sabres. It's going to be very interesting. I'm confident if Ottinger gets the start, even though he'll probably be a little bit sore, a little bit tired, but he's the hot hand right now. So it wouldn't surprise me if Bonus feats the hot hand, but also you do have a fresh goalie in Braden Holtby, who's had a good year. His last outing, certainly not one to write home about, a 4-0 loss to the Colorado Avalanche. So that's certainly going to be something to be on the lookout for throughout the day as morning skate unfolds and as the game, as puck drop approaches in this game. Overall, though, for this game, give me the Dallas Stars in a close one, potentially another overtime game. I think 3-2 is a good score there, similar to last night's game against the Jets. Give me a Dallas Stars 3-2 win with a Joe Pavelski first goal. That is my prediction for tonight's matchup. But that's going to do it for today's episode of Locked On Stars. Thank you again for making us your first listen of the day, and I'll go make your second listen of the day, the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast. Those guys, they post every single day. They make shows every single day. Flip Livingstone and Steele Roden, giving you all the insight that you need to be the best player in your fantasy league. You can find them wherever you get your podcast at, just like the Locked On Stars podcast. And if you do not already subscribe to or follow the Locked On Stars podcast, I encourage you to do so. It just takes a quick second and it helps the show out a ton. You can find us wherever you get your podcast at and on YouTube as well. We are on YouTube, over 150 subscribers. So thank you guys for that. I love to see that number continue to climb, because that means the little family that we have here is continuing to grow as well here at Locked On Stars. But be sure to tune in tomorrow as we'll be breaking down this Stars Predators matchup. You're not going to want to miss it, and we will get you sent on your way properly for the weekend. We'll see you tomorrow, Stars fans. Have a great Thursday.